Michael Cavotta, artist, author, and athlete. I have known you for a while, but I'm really excited to have you here today. How are you feeling?
Couldn't be better. Glad to be here.
You have been on a really wild journey, and this has been a conversation I've really been looking forward to having today. But before we dive in on all the things, why don't you give us a little about who you are, kind of what you do, stuff like that?
Sure. Well, who I am is an evolving question and an answer that goes along with it. But for the past 15 years, I've spent behind the lens, camera, photographing humans, learning what I can about people in the process of being present and showing up authentically in the world. I do what I can to help people show up as their authentic selves in a place where most of us feel compelled to perform, just because camera is taught to us from a young age is a lie detector, and only actors and certain kinds of people are supposed to be in front of it, because the rest of us are exposed. But as the years have gone on, I've kind of worked my way into a process that helps people connect with themselves first. And I like to think of the way that I photograph people as more of an inside-out process than about a certain look, a certain light. It's more about the light inside a person and being able to focus and direct that instead of what you're placing on somebody. And I think that makes maybe how I approach photography a little bit different. You'd have to ask the people who have endured the process. It's a lot more head work than head shot, to be honest. And that's kind of what I'm known for.
Absolutely. And obviously, like you said, you're someone that's always been kind of spending behind the lens, helping people find their light. And the thing that I'm excited about today is we have you in front of the lens to tell your story, because as someone that has spent so much of their work with people, helping them find themselves and finding their authenticity, you have a really crazy story of your own journey and how you found your own light and developed it, if you will. And as someone, for me, as you know, for my own business, my own brand, my own stories, I've developed the slogan, fitness beyond the physical. And I really believe that there's so much more than what meets the eye, as do you. And that's kind of going to be a little bit of our conversation today, because I'm really interested and curious about what the beyond the physical means for you. And you've had a really big healing journey, and your healing journey hasn't just been something physical, as we know, but I figure we can kind of like dive right in a little bit with that. Obviously something that, little plug for you is that you've been working on a book, and I know we're kind of going to tiptoe around that.
No, we can get into it if it makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And that's something really cool, but something that, as someone that got to kind of dive into that a little bit before it hits the masses, I know you really speak about movement and healing and all these things. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about with you, is just over your journey, shifting your mindset towards a more holistic approach in life.
I think for me, I've spent probably the past 20 years trying to find my way back to a more fitness-based, physical kind of lifestyle, and worked my way from a lot of really bad back issues and things as a younger man. It's funny that I get to say that now that I have a white beard and I'm old, right? I could say as a younger man.
Yes.
Did my tour of duty for some years in the CrossFit world, learning a lot about what I'm capable of, where the limits are, what it means to truly suffer and go to a dark place. I had no idea until I experienced it, what it means to push.
Yep.
I don't know if I speak for anyone else, but I kind of grew up through the 80s as an athlete, and I just don't know that there was the same kind of awareness or intensity that was brought to training. And I certainly, speaking just for myself, did not learn what that was about until later in life. And, that's been one of the keys that I think has helped me lean into the movement part of trying to, and again, we're speaking tangentially about the health issue that I'm battling. Of course, I was a year and change now diagnosed with prostate cancer, stage 2. And I elected not to treat it conventionally, although my doctor was recommending either surgery, radiation, chemo, the works. And opted to treat it naturopathically with a doctor's guidance and to use a metabolic approach to try and give myself a shot at, frankly, what I think is the more difficult road of eliminating the things that compromise our immune system, that lead us into metabolic dysfunction and hamstring our body's ability to heal itself. And it's been an interesting learning experience, both from just the brain, learning about our foods, our environment, and all the things that affect the trajectory of disease progression, and also what you learn about yourself spiritually and mentally as you go through the process of trying to put yourself on an ideal trajectory to healing. We can get into all the details that you want about that. I think some of the stuff might be new for some of your listeners, but I think that the more we tune into what's happening in the conversation around health and wellness right now, there's a lot of information, a lot of spotlight being put through people like RFK Jr. now running a lot of what's going to be, I think, a different outlook at the government level about healthcare and what Americans deserve and are entitled to. And there are a lot of voices, prominent voices in the culture that are, I think, part of an awakening. And I'm happy to say that some of that has made its way into my life. And if there's any way that my story or my journey can be a light for somebody else who might be facing something similar, that'd be great.
We only know what we know. And I am someone that is always open to finding, okay, what is another avenue to get to the same place? What's another road to get to the destination that we're looking to achieve or to arrive to, rather. And, it's hard because I feel like for a lot of people, all they know is the conventional approach to certain things, and to healing, we only think it's black and white, when it couldn't be anything further from that, which is what has made me so inspired for our conversation today, because I've been looking for someone to share, someone that took that other road, the road less traveled, if you will, right? Because it is less traveled. It's scary when someone goes into the unknown and doing something different than what's always been told to them to do. And before we get into little details, I just want to know initially, when you first got that diagnosis, what did that feel like for you?
It's actually, there's something about, I only lost one night's sleep post-diagnosis, and it had nothing to do with the diagnosis itself. It had to do with a fork in the road about how I was going to treat it. There was something about the way that the news came to me that I almost felt like it was a when, not an if. I've had prostate cancer in my family. My father had it, and fortunately, was successful in his treatment. That wasn't anything that shortened his life, but I've known other family members and close family friends who've really suffered through the treatment protocol, the conventional process. And you would think that would make me more alarmed when those words are spoken to my wife and I by a doctor in a room saying, "Hey, Michael, you have stage 2 prostate cancer, and we're recommending you treat." But what was interesting about that visit and what I heard was, you're young, you're otherwise healthy, and I don't want you to react as if your house is on fire. You have time to make a decision. You have time to research what's best for you. And what I took that as was a much broader mandate to look around and to look inside myself than to just decide which on the menu of invasive procedures am I going to choose. And instead, I ended up pursuing what options might be available if I wanted to approach it. Again, going back to how I like to photograph people inside out. Well, what if I wanted to bring myself inside out and what resonates with me and feels like this is the right thing, that my body and my mind and my spirit says, this is the move for me. And it ended up being the high difficulty lift of completely eliminating sugar, the majority of processed food, a whole laundry list of supplementation and things that would be guided by genomic testing and monthly blood work. I can't even tell you how many vials of blood I get taken out of me every month just to manage and monitor how my metabolic processes are working, to try and put me in a green zone where I'm healing myself faster than the cancer can hurt me. And that's at least how it was positioned to me when I decided that was worth a shot. 15 months later, the net of the story is I'm still symptom free. I never had any symptoms of cancer, which is wonderful. In fact, if I hadn't been just doing regular blood work and monitoring my PSA levels because of family history, I probably would never have even known there was something wrong with me for another decade. At least that's what I was told. But where I fell with it personally was if there was a chance for me to be able to see if my body was capable of doing it on the harder path, that I owed it to myself to give that a shot before I did anything that might be permanently. Look, I'm not suggesting that there's anything wrong with the standard of care relative to anybody's chronic disease state or cancer condition. But I will say that not every treatment protocol is the best option for every person, and that I think we all owe it to ourselves to be very open-minded as far as how we want to approach the totality of becoming healthy, because it's not just about getting rid of cancer. It's about addressing the root causes of what allowed that unproductive, unhealthy cellular process to take root. For me, I ended up trying to clean up my act to such a degree that I would have a chance at avoiding the knife or avoiding a course of weakening chemicals being pushed through my body or radiation that might damage a neighboring organ, who knows, and ended up with all these downstream benefits of a lifestyle, a nutrition profile, an activity level that I had never known before. And I thought I was doing pretty good for myself, honestly. Before I was diagnosed, most people would have said, oh, he's one of the healthiest people they know, fit, an athlete, master's athlete, blah, blah, blah. But I had no idea that a year after turning myself into my own science experiment under a doctor's care, of course, that I would end up effectively turning the clock back hard on my body and essentially inhabiting the body of a 26-year-old gladiator. At least that's what the DexaFit people told me a couple of weeks ago when I went in there, and they said, well, your biological age and your chronological age aren't matching. And well, there's no question in my mind. It's simply traceable back to what are you putting in your body? How often are you moving it? And what's your state of mind? And I think that might be even possibly the biggest piece is where is your head? Because everything follows.
And I definitely am going to want to get into each of those pillars with you in a second. And before I do, I'm hearing all these different things here. How did you know how to navigate this alternative route, though? So it's like when you first get the diagnosis, you said the doctor comes to you. Well, you have time, right? And to look at your options, which I'm sure looks different for different people. But you said, okay, well, what am I going to choose? So when you went to there, how did you even know how to set up this whole protocol that you did? How was that process?
It's actually kind of interesting because I knew that there was probably a holistic option that would be available to me if I were open to it, and that it might be difficult to maintain I've had some experience with paleo-based keto-type nutrition plans, and this I figured would just be that times X, in terms of difficulty level restrictions. I really didn't know what else was involved with the entirety of a metabolic rebuild. The story of how I found my doctors is, there's one of those things that's beyond, just what you see. I was talking about looking for ideas, an alternate way of approaching this. And I shared that with a friend of mine who I know through the gym circuit. And he's always been a super healthy person and very much a naturopathic lifestyle type person. And we discussed what was on my mind and what I was up against. And some days later, I didn't even get any words from him. I just got a picture of the cover of a book sent to me in a text message. It was a picture of Dr. Nasha Winter's book called The Metabolic Approach to Cancer. I immediately jumped on Google, looked it up, read everything that I could short of buying the book yet, just because I wanted to try and get a sense of where it was coming from before I committed to a purchase and to reading something. And I was blown away by what I was reading just at the top level discussion. And some of her podcasts, which were available, I tuned into, and it spoke to me in a way that whenever you listen to someone speak and you don't need facts, you're hearing truth. And that's how it spoke to me. And it may not affect everybody that same way. I knew right away that this is how I was going to at least take a shot. And if I ended up at a point where down the road I was in over my head and my life was being threatened, which at this point I was told that it wasn't imminent, that I might pivot. Certainly I'm not so closed-minded as to say any standard medical procedure isn't worth doing. It's not my position at all. I'm not an extremist that way, but I am a maximalist when it comes to what are you able to do on your own, and what is your body, what miracles is your body able to show you before you outsource the healing process to an operating room or to a drug or frankly to anybody else. That search and the kind of the catalyst that book cover sparked, ended up finding a group of physicians right here in Cleveland who were affiliated with Dr. Winter's approach, and immediately made an appointment and hit it off with them. And it was a great partnership. And they are the ones that built out my protocol. I can't take any credit for doing anything other than following it, which some would say is actually the harder thing to do.
I agree.
But it's a team thing.
Yeah.
I'm really glad to have, shout out to Options Naturopathic and Cleveland Heights for being there for me. And it's been a wonderful experience.
It's interesting. I have a lot of people come on here, and I've had a lot of medical professionals. Common denominator, even from people in the medical field, is to advocate for yourself and people being empowered with their own voice and their decisions. Sometimes I feel like we just get told something and then we fall apart from that. Like we get told something and we're like, okay, well, this just must be it and this is it. Yeah. But I think it's that willingness and that drive. I like the word drive, to look beyond those parameters. Because I feel like for so many things in life, we get stuck in a box just based on what we're told, what we see, and what we know. And when we're stuck in that box, you feel like you have nowhere else to go. Sure. I've always described it as like, it's just like this box is around you. And no matter how much I hit it, I'm never going to get out of it because I'm not willing to open the top and see what else is out there. And I really wanted to reference that because the whole time you're talking, I'm just picturing that box in my mind and how you were so willing to break that barrier when you didn't know what could or would happen if you took this approach. No. Now, what came on the other side is amazing. Like, it's more than you probably even imagine, right? But it's like you still had to take that leap of faith to trust that I'm making my decision to do this, regardless of what anyone else might say around me or what people might think of this approach. I'm going to stand strong on something that my gut and my intuition told me to do. And I wanted to highlight that because that really came strong for me as you were talking.
As you say that, and it mirrors back to me the truth of how I felt in that moment, it's important to say that I'm the kind of person that was going to probably do what I felt was right for me
Mm-hmm.
regardless. But I don't think that this process would have been as successful without the support and the faith of my family. I think on some level we're more daunted and unsettled by the diagnosis than I was. I think on some level, maybe my wife and kids would have been happier to just have it just cut out and let's put this chapter behind us. Just get a surgery or do whatever, and then we can stop contemplating the mortality of a loved one.
Yeah.
But when I explained where I was on it and what I believed to be possible, they backed my play, and I haven't had to fight. It's been difficult, I think, not just on me, but on others because of the restricted lifestyle that I have. I don't impose it on anybody else, but it's hard to ignore.
Yeah.
You know, when you're the person in the household that is on the outside of things that are typically social bonding experiences.
Lifestyle, actually, because I feel like I wanted
Sure.
to touch on that.
Oh,
that you
yeah,
have
yeah,
to
yeah.
do. Yeah.
So I don't want to bore everybody with the nuts and bolts of what therapeutic level ketogenic processing is about, but basically, in my case, my activity level, which is unusual for a 55-year-old American, grants me a little bit more leeway on this front, but I operate on somewhere between 25 and 30 net carbs a day. So what it takes to restrict at that level, not the quantity of food, but the type, and working towards keto macros that are heavily biased towards proteins and fats, and, you know, total elimination of a lot of the things that bring joy in life, and are the source of social connection. Sharing a birthday cake, you know, you pick anything that you want. It's very easy to find the ritual of connection and community revolves around food. And when you're doing it so different, you effectively other yourself to a degree that anybody who, you know, has ever been, here's my chicken breast and my broccoli Tupperware, and you show up at parties like that, you're kind of a downer.
Right.
It's kind of a little bit of a freer pass when people know you're doing it because you're trying to process cancer, so they give you a little bit of a break. Yeah. But it doesn't change the fact that you're out of step. You're out of step with your loved ones. You're out of step with friends, and that could be lonely. But for me, it's felt pretty natural. Maybe because part of me is comfortable being different and always has been.
Yeah.
And I think seeing what life looks like, feels like on the far side of a year of doing this it's a different attitude about it now than it was when you're looking at the unknown of, like, is this even going to work? What's it going to be like? Will I even be able to continue competing as an athlete on essentially no carbs and, you know, no jet fuel pre-workouts before competitions? And, you know, it's been a real learning experience about what the body's capable of doing. It's a miraculous machine. And if your mind is open to what you can learn through struggle, through difficulty, through all the opportunities that we have for growth, I think there's real, like, next level living and next level understanding that comes as.
And since you officially made that decision, so when you went ahead and you said, I'm going to do this metabolic approach to healing, from that day you made the decision and you were on day one on starting, what role has your mentality played in this? Outside of just the physical, we're talking mentality too.
I think that it has to be the elephant in the room. It's about a commitment. It's about a belief that you as a being are worth the work that it takes in order to break through a challenge or to overcome an obstacle. And, a lot of the work that I've done creatively as a photographer, working with other people, ended up, without really realizing it, applying lessons learned in one area of my life in another, and seeing kind of like facets of a diamond, reflections of all different types of moments in time, kind of reflecting light in a single moment in the present. Say, this is where you need to be, and this is what you need to be doing. And I think, some of that, is the stuff that guided me to a place where I felt like I had more to share about that. I could call it a journey, adventure, quest, whatever, than I could fit in making an impact just behind a lens. So that kind of, I think, precipitated my motivation to start putting those thoughts into a way that could be shared. Because really, along the way here, I haven't been delusional. I don't know how long, in fact, none of us does, how long we're on the field. I mean,
of course,
we don't know the time of our passing, and all we do know is that we're given time to do something with. And I wanted to make sure that whatever time I have left with my family in this world, with the people that I care about, with anybody that cares to notice what I'm doing, I would want it to be nobody looking at it and saying, oh, if only he would have believed in himself a little bit more, or tried this more difficult thing, he probably would have been capable of. I wanted to believe in myself the way that others around me had. And that's been, I think, for me personally, the growth that I've experienced learning about myself by doing this difficult thing, and seeing how it's not a war that I've been fighting. I've never really thought about the cancer as an invading terrorist. Instead, I've approached it like a teacher. Said, okay, you may not be my favorite teacher, but there's something to learn here. And I've kind of danced with it rather than fought with it. And I would bet that that's probably the biggest piece, the mindset piece that you alluded to earlier, to maybe why all of this seems to be working.
Because I feel like, too, when we have something, right, whether that be cancer, whether that be diabetes, whether that be depression, anxiety, I feel like a lot of the times when we have a diagnosis of any capacity or label, we could say label, this can go to a lot of different directions, of course, we let that define us. I feel like a lot of the times we make that the narrative of our life. Like, the narrative of my life is X, right? And, when you had got this, I feel like, instead of it just being like, I have cancer, that's my whole identity, it seems like you switched the gears a little bit.
Oh, I remember about 6 months in, and things were really turning around for me, physically. A lot of at the blood level, a lot of my markers were starting to actually, the thing that got me to go in and have MRIs and biopsies and all that, the rising PSA was actually going the other way. So really, really positive impact, and kind of a metamorphosis in the physical level, from the outside looking into, and a lot of unexpected success in my sport, which I had thought was going to possibly be, during this treatment process, an impossibility, let alone to do really well. People were encouraging me to talk about what was happening, because the fact that it was all happening and no one knew I was being treated for cancer, I didn't want it to be my brand. I didn't want to be the cancer guy. And so for months, I didn't really talk about it publicly because I was worried that, I would be giving away a piece of myself. I hesitate to say that because I don't begrudge the way that many people draw attention to the importance of cancer research and the importance of catching cancers early by sharing their story and essentially becoming the local face of breast cancer or whatever it is that they're battling. Mm. But the idea that somebody, probably my wife, she seems to have all the good ideas, put in my head that if there's somebody else on the same train as I am 6 months prior, wondering what is their life going to be like? Are they going to be able to continue their sport, their passion? Will they be locked in a cancer-fueled depression cage? Are all these things just the thing that happens? Is this the gauntlet that has to be run? The fact that I was living the proof that it is not have to be that, I can't hoard that message simply because I don't want to have cancer be part of my brand. That's keeping a gift rather than sharing it. So having this conversation with you now where, you set the stage up front, is anything off limits about this conversation? No. Yeah. No. I want to be able to be as open with you about what it's felt like to be on this road, as real with you as you want to be about what it takes and how it feels sometimes, just on the off chance that somebody could be uplifted by it or be given a reason to take a second look at what seems to be, well, of course you'll get surgery if you're young and you're healthy and there's no downside. You should recover fast. I mean, these are the things that you're told when you are young and healthy. And I don't want to get off on a tangent about it, but you don't have to look very far right now. And you certainly don't have to travel into the underbelly of the internet to start seeing all the stories of why the standard of care, the drugs that we're being given, the foods that are being tolerated for Americans that aren't tolerated anywhere else in the world. I'm speaking about the chemicals, the additives, the other things. I think we're long past the point where you have to start asking questions about whether or not what well-meaning physicians are telling us is the right thing to do is in fact the right thing to do, or was that just what was taught to them by people who had a vested interest in the profitability of medication X or procedure Z? It's time to start asking those questions and to trust that the experts might not have the answer for you. It's all about you and your health. And like you said earlier, being an advocate for yourself.
There's so much on my mind from that right now, and I'm trying to figure out how I even want to go into next. I mean, I'm a big advocate of power in the body and mind. Mm-hmm. This is something I'm very passionate about. It has been since the beginning, and there's a reason I went into the industry I did, right? As a personal trainer, fitness is a lot more to me than just fitness. It's movement, and movement heals, right? And I've always been someone that's like, how can we explore things that aren't just the medication or the conventionals and this and the other, and something that's interesting to me. And again, I know every person has a different situation and story, right? Everything's going to be individualized. Everyone's going to have a different, thing that's going to work best for them or that is unique to their case, right? But it's interesting to look at, for example, with cancer, when you go ahead and do chemo, what the output is of that. Yeah. And then you took your approach. So you have chemo to this. Yeah. You have your approach to this. Yours is you feel better, you look the best you've looked, you perform better, and your age, I forgot the correct term, your metabolic age, is it?
I forget, they said chronological age versus whatever it is when like they do all these tests and then tell you, well, your body is more like.
So just to reiterate for people listening, you go on this journey to heal cancer and then you age backwards, which is wild, right? So you go on this way of following this protocol given to you as, we can say, a more, a holistic approach, just an alternative route to the same destination, right? And in the process of breaking your body down, you start to build it back up.
Yeah. And I think that being willing to question what you think you know, willing to revisit things that you may have tried in the past and been unsuccessful with, either because you were missing key pieces of information, or it was simply not the right time of your life. I mean, I look at young people starting a family, working to build a life. There are a lot of times daily fitness, daily movement, eating the cleanest of foods. Should they be top priorities? Well, yes, but everything's on a kind of a scale of time and place. And no matter where someone is in their life, no matter what their relative fitness or nutritional level is, pushing a little bit into discomfort to find out what works for you and what is sustainable. I mean, I would be the last person on earth to say that everybody should be doing what I'm doing.
Right. It's
extreme. It's what my situation demands. And I'm just grateful that apparently I'm built for this task, built for this test. And I think people underestimate themselves across the board. I see it in front of a camera. I hear it in deep conversation about what it means to be the authentic self. I mean, there are dark corners and prickly bushes that we try to avoid, but usually in those places that demand a little bit of courage or a willingness to be put in temporary discomfort in order to catalyze growth.
Yeah.
That is the life that we should be seeking. It would be great if I could say I didn't have to be told I have cancer in order to find out that there was a whole other level of health waiting for me. But I would never have pushed myself in that way, but for a reason. And we can talk, at the meta or metaphysical level, at the God level of what challenges are put before us, whether they're meant to weigh us down or to set us free. I have my opinions on that. And certainly the way that this is playing out for me, I have now not just ideas, but evidence about what it can be when you embrace now and hope for a tomorrow, but today is it. This is what we have.
Yeah.
And live that way. It's an exciting time right now, not just for me in my life, but I think for all of us. It's kind of scary too. AI, technology stuff. I don't know. I'm kind of optimistic about it, but I'm a product of the 80s, so I've seen the movies.
Okay, yeah.
Terminator, Matrix. These are all documentaries. We know how it goes.
Yes. Well, still.
Yeah. But I think that humanity's only chance in the face of artificial intelligence is authentic presence. It's the one thing that can't be faked. Everything else by definition is fakeable. Authenticity at its core is what is. Maybe, it's even traceable back to the I am that I am of biblical proportion. If we look for that in ourselves and we look for that in other people, I don't see how we lose.
And sometimes too, and you were saying something earlier, I had to write this down because it came to my head. Sometimes the answers we seek, we won't get to them unless we go through the things that we never thought we would have to go through.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And I think that when it's coming to truth that we're seeking, whatever that looks like for someone, you don't just have that fall in your lap. I think that it's just a matter of you have to not just go through the valley. You have to be willing to trudge through it. You have to be willing to fight your way through it. And in those moments of going through those darker moments, I mean, that's when you're able to really find the answer if you're willing to look. I feel like sometimes people go through hard times or they're facing adversity in their own story, but they don't actually ever come to the answer because they're still blind to it. I feel like you have a thought on that.
You are right on top of the mother lode. I believe that truth is light. I mean, as a photographer, it kind of makes sense.
Of course, absolutely.
About the light. It's the defining major metaphor of the subtly hinted at, soon to come book that I've written. But there was something that I stumbled across when I was writing it that I think if you connect it to what you just said, you could fill this room with the truth of it. So when we look around, everything that we see is visible to us as reflected light. What I didn't realize is that the visible spectrum of light only represents 0.00, I think 35, if memory serves, % of all light in the universe. Which means what we see around us, everything that we look at, the other 99% of light is invisible. What we see as darkness is where 99% of all light exists. So when you talk about the darkness in your story, the inability to see, those are truths in the perception, but they're lies in the reality, because that's all the light. It's waiting. It's there. Is that where God hides? Maybe. Is that where the secrets of the universe lie? Maybe. But what we do know is that if we're unwilling to look there, or we think that our eyes, what we see alone with our eyes, is all that is, well, we've blocked ourselves off from almost everything that is.
That was very deep. And I was just like,
I'll drink to that.
No, that was, well, because it's crazy. And I know the people that you and I are, I know we can definitely go down that so easily, right? Just that
Sure.
conversation. But it's just like, again, and I wasn't surprised as we're talking about someone who's on a journey of healing their cancer in a way that's unconventional, how we venture into this portion of just like, there's so much more than just like the cancer. It's what you found in your story along the way of it. You know, you said earlier, it was your teacher. You didn't look at it as something that would just define you or this, that, and the other. You looked at it as, okay, I have a diagnosis of cancer. This is what it's teaching me, and this is what I'm going to do about it. And, you know, like you were saying, I like how you're saying in 99% of darkness is where all light exists. But what if we took that concept and applied it to every avenue of our life? You know, I think that instead of looking at it like that, we just think that the darkness is just that. I feel like people, it's really hard for them to see the light in the midst of that. It's really hard for them to comprehend that there's more than what is around them. It's more than what meets the eye, that their circumstances is an end all be all. And I feel like that's when people go down, you know, the wormhole, and they really start to fall victim to their situations and their circumstances. As someone that also works with people different than you, but also similar.
I know what you do too. I mean, you have to, you meet people in a place of discomfort as well, and sometimes push them there on purpose.
Well, absolutely. And it's crazy, as something that started off as being a job of being a personal trainer, going into the gym and saying, I'm going to train women and I'm going to be that coach. How it turned into so much more, how it turned into something of meeting people in their brokenness every single day, how it turned to someone coming in the gym for a workout, but it was met with tears and someone opening up their story, how it came as when someone thinks they're looking for physical strength, what they really need is mental, you know, and it's been a really eye-opening experience for me, because my fitness journey was birthed from being in a really low point. I felt like, yes, physically it was going to solve all my answers, but on the way to building better muscles, it was really my mind and my spirit that changed. It was that fortitude of going, you know, I am working towards this to obviously feel better on the outside, but really there's something inside of me that's so lost, so broken, and I'm just trying to find any way to get to a better spot than where I'm at now. And sometimes we get so stuck on that journey of the external that we forget the internal is really what's changing if we allow it to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, and
your relationship with yourself completely
absolutely
changes. I mean,
yes.
pick any of those variables.
Yeah.
Mind, body, spirit.
Yeah.
Make gigantic shifts in one area.
Mm-hmm.
The others can't help but be affected.
Yeah.
And usually it's easiest to see that evidence when we're substantially weakened in one area, and we can see that it shows up in the others. Mm-hmm. Unhealthy bodies, unhealthy minds. It's in inevitable collision. Flip it the other way.
And it's just so interesting, because this goes back to, like, I mean, I'll never forget being like a kid, and I have a grandfather who was a doctor in holistic medicine. That was his thing. And I always grew up like, let food be thy medicine, and body, mind, spirit. But unfortunately, I just feel like nowadays that's just, we sometimes forget that can still be a cure, because it just doesn't seem like it could be, because it's like, well, medication this, medication that,
sure.
XYZ. We get, again, going into that box. And as someone that's always grown up around and coming from a Mediterranean family, very of Greek heritage, and, you know, going to Greece and just being around that product of life, I've always seen like a different style of living and of culture. And a lot of people don't, though. And that's why it's hard when you get thrown back into that. And I feel like it's sometimes, to some people, it seems too good to be true that you can healing in any capacity in just the body, mind, and the spirit. And I mean, as you were going to heal your body and like you had the mentality, I'm also curious about the spiritual component.
I think that all of those pieces, we're not designed, I don't believe we're designed to be average. You might take a metric and apply it across a population and end up, well, here is this is the numerical, this is what average is. But I think that each of us was born with a divinity, a piece of us that is more than we are capable of understanding until that connection is made. And whether that happens in a conventional sense or an abstract, whether it's inside of a church, a synagogue, a mosque, it could be in the woods where you've connected with the truth that there is something bigger than us. What you want to call it is your business. But its presence, at least for me, as it's borne out in my life, is undeniable. And you will see that everywhere you look, reflections of it. And I know a lot of people who are deep people of faith, and it seems that faith they have is in every direction other than in themselves. It's the last place they look for God or the Spirit or the divine. They see it everywhere, but they don't see it in themselves. And part of my journey as a photographer, and again, that term as a job or a role, I've never really seen myself as one. I prefer to think of myself as a witness, and that's just a machine that is my co-conspirator in the process, has always been about showing people that piece of themselves that they either never knew existed or didn't want to believe. And that's kind of my mission, is to be able to get other people on whatever path, a different life, different challenges, different everything.
Yep.
To know that common denominator is that piece, that spark, that little bit of light that's inside each of us is meant to shine and was never meant to be average. It's a lot.
I know, keep going. I'm like, there are all these profound statements, and it's just, again, you can get really deep on these conversations easily. That's why everyone listening, I'm like, I hope you're really absorbing this. Play it backwards if you need to. But it's the truth, though. I mean, everything you're saying, it literally is that truth. And something that's interesting for me, a question I want to ask, and I've asked this to different people in different ways. It can kind of, I guess, go two parts. During this process of, again, kind of going into, since we've been on the topic, obviously, of the cancer journey and this whole thing, whatever word resonates with you here, I will use God from my context. What has God's voice sounded like to you throughout this process? Has it been loud? Has it been soft? And in what moments do you feel like it was undeniable? And what did that feel like?
What a powerful question. My relationship with God is an interesting one in that I keep finding it reflected. I talked earlier about the diamond and the reflections and the facets. I keep seeing it everywhere. I'm waiting to be spoken to, but I'm kind of also resigning myself that the language for me is what I see. I see it all around me. I see it in my personal life, my personal journey, my personal response to things that, like, why was I not afraid when I was basically told, not get your shit in order, you're on a limited time.
Right.
Maybe this all plays out differently if I would have been denied the ability to hope or the ability or the permission to trust myself. That gift that I received, I know that many do not get, and there is kind of an existential threat placed on them that might change the calculus and the direction that someone pivots. But for me, I've been looking for years, or where the divine is showing up and what is my relationship to it, and not having answers and continuing to ask, everything from ayahuasca experiences to some real profound realizations in church. I mean, it spans a range of things that don't even feel like they belong together, like mixing and matching philosophies, ideas, faith traditions. The defining thread that's running through it all is this light that when you look, you can't help but see it. It's possible, just like we talked about, to exist in the 99% of all light exists in what our eyes perceive as darkness. If you choose to live in the sliver of visible spectrum that colors our existence, and it's the reason why we can see each other right now, I think that opening our minds and our hearts to the idea that there's much more going on around us than we think is really the beginning to that relationship. I don't know where it goes. I can't really lay much claim to where God is speaking, but the evidence is all around.
Mm-hmm. And while you're in that space, I want to capture it. If someone listening right now is going through something, whether they just got a diagnosis just like you, or they're really battling with their depression, or just hope in any way, whether, again, it could be something physical, it could be something mental, both those health spectrums can be really deep. Someone's sitting in that space right now and they're feeling really lost. What would you say to them right now?
I think that the most important thing, and it might, this is a challengeable premise, and that is the idea that even if you find yourself feeling alone in the face of a challenge, of a looming darkness, I would suggest that even if you don't have a friend, you don't have that person sitting across from you who truly understands where you are right now and what you're going through, it would be a tragic mistake to believe that you are alone in the space that you occupy. I think that the idea of that spark being in each of us is enough of a reason to believe that the answer to the question, the choice that needs to be made, if you're looking within yourself and your heart is open, I think that the answers, you'll know what's right for you. The head could get in the way. Your feelings could be part of it, but ultimately I think that spirit component is as real as your body. You just have to decide, again, are you tied to that teeny tiny sliver of what your eyes can see, or are you open to a bigger story and your role in that bigger story?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Something you said that really stuck with me, because I've talked about this a lot, and as we are kind of like venturing towards the end of this convo soon, this is really something that I've focused on in myself over the course of the last, I don't know, maybe decade at this point, is that battle of the mind versus the spirit. Because I feel like a lot of people can't distinguish the voice between the two. Like, I thought about it even earlier in this convo when you had made that decision that, okay, instead of going to chemo, I'm going to trust my gut and I want to explore this other option, right? But you felt a calmness about it. And to me, it sounds like you had this calmness because it was an inner knowing that maybe you can't explain to people, but you knew that was the direction you were supposed to take. Even if, say, not saying this is truth, but say your wife said no, or one of your parents said no, or your brother, your sister, your cousin, your aunt, whoever. Someone told you, Michael, I don't think that's the right thing for you. Michael, I think that's the wrong idea. Michael, why would you do that? X, Y, Z. And mentally, you could have heard that and been like, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't do this. But you had this inner knowing and calmness. I know it doesn't make sense to anyone else, even me. I just know that this is the direction I'm supposed to go, and I don't have to follow it. But I know if I don't, it's going to weigh on me forever.
Absolutely. And I can tell you there are other areas in my life where it's very easy to intellectually open my mind to an alternate possibility, an alternate choice, or maybe this isn't the right decision in my business or in the way that I handle a personal relationship. Maybe there was a different, but when you are moved in a direction that flies in the face of perhaps even the quote unquote evidence, and you have zero doubt and you're not plagued by fear, that you need to, I think you need to lean into.
Absolutely. I think it's being able for people to just like really take time to understand what that voice sounds like, to like what it feels like, this, that, and the other. I mean, it's kind of like a gut versus a mind thing, with a lot of decisions in life and as we do.
I just realized why I was struggling with when your question about the voice, right? And the conversation, what does God speak to you? Sometimes it's when there is no chatter, when there is calm and stillness, that is the knowing. It doesn't even need to be said. There isn't a voice in your head telling you this is the path. You just know it. Because a lot of times the voice that's in your head, I suspect, is we like to complicate our own lives, I think.
Yeah.
And any opportunity where there isn't a lot of back chatter on a topic, and you still feel like you've read a mountain of evidence that you just know, maybe that's in what is not said. You don't hear, but still feel nonetheless is where the true measure of that power is.
Yeah. And, that's been for me as well, like so many different situations in my life, even on like a micro level. But a good example of that is, I was thinking too just now, the podcast, like we're sitting here looking at each other talking today. This was something that was like weighing on me for so long. I remember like everything was like, I wouldn't go that direction, like blah, 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 the insecurities, the self-doubt, the fear. And I remember the very first podcast episode I ever put out back in 2019 was called Open the Box, because I had the mic sitting in a box under my bed.
Oh, that's so excellent.
And I wouldn't open it. And it was like, when people were to ask me this question, like, what is that feeling, that gut, I would say an itch. And I know that sounds weird, but I had this like itch on me every day. Like, you're supposed to open the box. Like, you're supposed to do this. And the more that I fought it, it was like, it felt like a weight was on my shoulders every day. Like, this is what you're supposed to do, but you're listening to like what other people might say about it, how people say that's stupid. Why would you do it? Even yourself. But the minute I opened the box, I turned on the mic, it was this flush of energy, and I can't explain it. And this is carried into different situations in my life. But again, as this is just one example, again, that's the same thing with like your stuff here. It's like, you can't even explain it. You just know you're supposed to do something, even when it doesn't make sense. And that's when it comes trusting in something more than you can see or perceive. You just know it's what something or someone is telling you to do.
For sure. For sure. It's actually what you were describing was how the run up to me eventually writing a book, what it was like. It was for years.
Yeah, exactly.
You need to be writing. You need to be writing. And it wasn't until it ceased to be an idea and it took on an energy of its own, that it just happened. It wasn't something I had to will myself to. It wasn't a decision. It wasn't, and then it was in a big way. And that wave, riding that wave and kind of collecting the things that I've been picking up and the places that I've seen light over the past, 2 years. I mean, it's a wider lens that I take on my life, but ultimately it's an accelerating process that gets you to major transformation.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
So, quick one. How many years ago do you think that the idea for the book was planted in you? If you just had to give an estimate, when it first kind of was like a thought.
2.
About 2
2.
years.
Yeah, probably 2 years. I probably, I mean, shoulds are not, we shouldn't live with shoulds.
Right.
Right? I just double shoulded.
It's okay.
I was always meant to write a book. I knew this. What it was going to be about, when, those were all variables. I resisted it until there was no resistance. There was no question that something needed to move through me. It wasn't me creating words to create an outcome, which is how I lived the majority of my life. This was suddenly, something needs to move through me, and I'm a vehicle, right? Mm-hmm. Let go. This is what has to shine, if you will. A light is now moving through me rather than I'm trying to control it. And here we are.
And the reason I asked this, so you said about 2 years ago, maybe your cancer diagnosis was the missing piece for that book to be finished. Have you ever thought about part of your story too? And I think to kind of tie that full circle, like you had the idea 2 years ago, but how different the book would have been 2 years ago, but maybe you had to go through this other part for the book to be complete.
Sure. And probably 2 years ago was when it actually started. And I had no way of knowing until it got to a point where it was noticeable. So who knows? But I suspect that like it is for many people, a cancer diagnosis can be a defining moment in a timeline, and what you do in the wake of it, what comes next, shapes the rest of your life. Right. Whatever the clock is running. I don't know this. I haven't been told. I haven't had a vision, nothing. But based on what my body is telling me, I'm probably going to die from something else. If this continues, it'll be something crazy. It'll be me. Who knows?
Something else.
I'm not going to imagine it.
I don't know. Okay, well,
Right.
So I guess like kind of like looking on all this now and like kind of like coming back like full circle then with everything, like would you say from like the first day that you had a diagnosis to now, that how would you say you feel overall like in this moment then after going through everything you've been?
I'm assuming I still have cancer. I won't get imaging because it damages mitochondrial health. So unless I'm forced by circumstance that I can't foresee, no MRI is happening. Yeah. So I don't know what the state of tumor growth is, or if is in fact gone the other way. Yeah. All I know is I'm healthier than I've ever been. There are no symptoms, and all the second order, third order benefits of living this way, I would take forever if I could have them. Yeah. So I wouldn't trade cancer for anything. Yeah. It made me who I am today. Now you could pick any unfortunate or unpleasant, unexpected injection of news into your life, and you might be able to say the same thing. But in this case, cancer is the sand grain that turns itself into a pearl, right? In me. It's just how it's played out so far. Yeah. And I'm grateful. I think gratitude is a big part of not just using it as a tool. Like I need a gratitude practice because it's supposed to be good for me. Yeah. But to truly feel it and connect with it has amplifying effects in life that I certainly was disconnected from as a younger man. And I think that if you can find a way of living a gratitude practice rather than having one, you probably end up living longer.
I would validate that. Yeah. I would validate, because it's how you're choosing, like what lens are you looking through? I think that's really at the end of the day, it's like with anything, like what lens are you choosing to look through on your situation? Because that lens is either going to make you or break you. That lens is either going to propel you forward or it's going to take you and it's going to put you. I really believe that where the mind goes, the body follows. So as physically as we have something going on, if you mentally keep going in that direction that the body is already dealing with, I do think you're going to catapult yourself more that way. I really think that you can throw off that balance beam a bit. If your mentality is going to be stronger and higher than what you're dealing with, I do think the body will catch up and it'll follow you in either direction.
Yeah, I've been playing around the past 6 months with a lot of quantum meditation stuff. I don't know if you've ever listened to any of Joe Dispenza's stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I've read Joe Dispenza's.
Yeah, I
love Joe.
I have one of his guided morning meditations on Spotify that you can get. That's really quite good. And I'm pretty sure I'm pulling myself physically into the future.
Well, oh, that's great. That's good. Well, that's
I think it's happening.
Okay, well, good. No. See how many things have come from this? So many positives. So that's the tie-up is whatever you're going through, you could have positives of it if you choose to. Because I feel, I mean, this is just going to be our last question to close off. Looking back, is there anything you would have done differently from up until right now?
I would have done probably many things differently if I were living on a different timeline. But because it's one thing to reflect back and say, well, what if? But I don't know. I mean, I want to honor your question, but I also don't know how to answer it without feeding the demon that is regret. You know, I think that we make our moves based on a series of moves, and it doesn't do us much good to second guess what put you in the chair here with me today or vice versa. And to just be, again, sounds corny, but grateful for every sliding door, every possible alternative that did not happen that would have created a different outcome where this conversation doesn't happen. So if I look back and say, well, what would I want someone else to know? Now we're having a different conversation because we can affect someone's timeline today with an idea that was drawn from looking back. So that's how I think I would frame it. So the respectful way to answer the question is, let's look back and say, what would I want someone else in my shoes today who's getting a diagnosis to know?
Yep.
Run. Do not walk. To whomever you trust to help guide you through completing the connection, mind, body, spirit, so that you can heal. I dawdled 2 months, 3 months before I committed 100% saying this is it, because I had the time. I was told I had the time, so I didn't pressure myself. And maybe I needed to be unpressured so that I stayed calm. The more you look at it, the more you realize things happen the way they do, because that's the way they have to happen.
I want to cap there because that was such a good closing line. I really think that things have to happen the way they have to happen for a reason. I want to just close with that because I feel like that's exactly what I want someone to take away.
Happy to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
That's it, gang.